She sat in advanced placement computer science wearing her school standard uniform, navy blazer, white shirt, regulation skirt, looking like every other 17-year-old trying to survive senior year. But when Chloe Martinez reached for her laptop during a coding assignment, her sleeve rode up just enough to expose a small tattoo on her wrist that made her classmates stop typing. Binary code numbers wrapped around delicate flowers, but what the curious students couldn't decode was that those numbers represented the exact date and time she'd penetrated the Pentagon's most classified network systems, at age 15. Chloe Martinez had perfected the art of being perfectly average while conducting the most sophisticated cyber warfare operations in modern history. At 17, she possessed the kind of unremarkable appearance that made her invisible in crowds: medium height, brown hair kept in regulation style for her private school, features that were pleasant but forgettable. Her academic performance was carefully calibrated to be excellent but not extraordinary, maintaining a 3.8 GPA that demonstrated competence without attracting unwanted attention. To her classmates at St. Catherine's Preparatory Academy, Chloe was the military brat whose father worked at the Army recruitment office downtown. She participated in appropriate extracurricular activities, maintained friendships with the right social groups, and seemed destined for a conventional path through military academy to a career in defense contracting. What none of them knew was that Chloe Martinez had been conducting classified penetration operations against some of the world's most secure computer networks since she was 13 years old. Her journey into cyber warfare hadn't followed any conventional path. Unlike teenage hackers who learned their skills through internet forums and underground communities, Chloe had developed her capabilities through systematic study of her father's military materials and careful observation of security protocols at the recruitment office where she'd spent countless hours during school breaks. Staff Sergeant Carlos Martinez was a 20-year Army veteran who transitioned to recruitment duties after a combat injury had ended his deployment eligibility. His home office contained a mixture of official recruitment materials and classified documents related to his security clearance, creating an environment where Chloe had been exposed to military information systems from an early age. But Chloe's interest in her father's work had evolved beyond casual curiosity when she discovered that many of the computer systems he accessed appeared to have vulnerabilities that could be exploited with sufficient technical knowledge. Her first successful penetration had occurred when she was 14, during a summer afternoon when her father had left his laptop logged into a military personnel database while taking a phone call. Chloe had spent 20 minutes exploring the system architecture, documenting access protocols and identifying security weaknesses that seemed obvious once you understood how to look for them. What had started as adolescent curiosity had quickly evolved into something much more significant when Chloe realized that military computer networks contained information that could be valuable to various organizations willing to pay substantial amounts for classified intelligence. Over the following 3 years, Chloe had developed increasingly sophisticated techniques for accessing government and military computer systems. Her methods were careful and methodical. She never stole large amounts of data or caused system damage that might attract attention. Instead, she focused on gathering specific information that could be sold to corporate intelligence firms and foreign governments through encrypted channels that couldn't be traced to her real identity. Chloe's cyber operations had generated over $400,000 in cryptocurrency payments, money that she'd carefully laundered through multiple digital wallets before converting to traditional currency and investing in index funds that would provide financial security for her planned college education. But perhaps more importantly, Chloe's penetrations had provided her with knowledge about military capabilities, personnel movements, and strategic planning that far exceeded what any civilian teenager should have possessed. She'd read classified assessments of international security threats, reviewed operational plans for military deployments, and accessed personnel files that contained detailed information about special operations personnel. The Pentagon penetration that was commemorated in her wrist tattoo had been her most ambitious operation, conducted on her 15th birthday as a personal challenge to test whether she could access the most secure military networks in the world. The attack had required 6 months of preparation, during which Chloe had systematically compromised lower-level military systems to gather credentials and access protocols that could be used for privilege escalation within the Pentagon's network architecture. Her entry point had been a routine maintenance account used by contractors who serviced computer equipment at various military installations. Chloe had identified the account through social engineering techniques that involved calling contractor companies and pretending to be a military personnel administrator verifying account credentials. Once she'd obtained initial access, Chloe had spent 3 weeks mapping the Pentagon's internal network structure, identifying vulnerable systems and planning movement paths that would allow her to reach classified databases without triggering security monitoring systems. The actual penetration had taken place during a period when network traffic was highest, allowing Chloe's activities to blend with legitimate user behavior that made detection unlikely. She'd accessed personnel databases, strategic planning documents, and intelligence assessments that contained information about military operations in multiple theaters. But Chloe's most significant discovery had been documentation about a classified program that was developing cyber warfare capabilities specifically designed to counter the kind of attacks she'd been conducting. The irony hadn't been lost on her that her own penetration techniques were being studied by military cybersecurity specialists who were working to prevent exactly the kind of unauthorized access she'd achieved. The binary code tattooed around her wrist contained multiple layers of encoded information: the date and time of her Pentagon access, geographic coordinates of the server she'd compromised, and encrypted references to specific documents she'd reviewed during the operation. But the tattoo also served a practical purpose beyond commemoration. The binary sequences included access codes and system identifiers that Chloe could reference if she needed to demonstrate her capabilities to potential employers or clients who might question her technical abilities. Chloe's computer science class at St. Catherine's Academy was taught by Mr. David Chen, a former software engineer who transitioned to teaching after a successful career in Silicon Valley. Chen was technically competent and genuinely interested in developing his students' programming abilities, but he had no idea that one of his most dedicated students possessed cyber warfare capabilities that exceeded those of most professional military hackers. The class was working on a collaborative programming project that required students to develop security protocols for a theoretical financial database. Chloe approached the assignment with the same methodical precision she brought to all academic work, demonstrating competence that was impressive but not suspicious. "Martinez," Chen said, reviewing Chloe's code during a lab session, "your security implementations are quite sophisticated. Where did you learn advanced encryption techniques?" Chloe continued typing while responding. "Online tutorials and documentation. There are good resources for learning cryptographic methods if you know where to look." Chen nodded, accepting the explanation while noting that Chloe's knowledge seemed to exceed what most high school students would acquire through casual online learning. "Your understanding of authentication protocols is particularly advanced. Have you considered computer science as a college major?" "Yes, sir. I'm planning to study cybersecurity with a focus on defensive systems." The answer was technically accurate. Chloe did plan to study cybersecurity, though her current focus was more offensive than defensive. The truth was that Chloe's academic performance in computer science was carefully modulated to demonstrate competence without revealing the full extent of her capabilities. She could have completed the semester's curriculum in 2 weeks, but doing so would have attracted attention that might lead to questions she couldn't answer. During one particularly routine class session, as students worked on debugging code for their security project, Chloe reached across her desk to access a reference manual that had fallen near her laptop. The movement required her to extend her arm fully, causing her blazer sleeve to ride up her wrist and exposing the delicate tattoo that she'd kept hidden for 2 years. The binary code numbers wrapped around stylized flowers created an intricate pattern that appeared decorative until you looked closely enough to realize the numbers weren't random. Sarah Kim, the student sitting next to Chloe, noticed the tattoo immediately and found herself staring at the detailed artwork. "Oh my God, Chloe, that's such a pretty tattoo," Sarah said, loud enough to draw attention from other students nearby. "What do the numbers mean?" Chloe quickly pulled her sleeve down, but not before several other classmates had seen the exposed artwork. The binary sequences were clearly visible, and some of the more technically advanced students began trying to decode the numerical patterns. "It's just decorative," Chloe replied, attempting to redirect attention back to the programming assignment. "Binary code mixed with floral designs." But Jake Morrison, a senior who'd been accepted to MIT's computer science program, had managed to photograph the tattoo with his phone before Chloe covered it. During the remaining class time, he worked on converting the binary sequences to decimal and ASCII values, trying to determine if the numbers contained meaningful information. "Martinez," Jake said as students prepared to leave class, "those binary numbers on your tattoo, they convert to what looks like date and time stamps. And GPS coordinates. That's pretty sophisticated for decorative artwork." Chloe gathered her materials while considering her response. "I guess the tattoo artist was more creative than I realized." Jake's expression suggested he wasn't entirely satisfied with the explanation, but the bell rang before he could pursue the topic further. That evening, Jake continued analyzing the binary sequences he'd captured in his photograph. His technical skills were advanced for a high school student, and within 2 hours he decoded enough of the tattoo to realize that it contained references to what appeared to be classified military information. The date stamp converted to a timestamp from 2 years earlier, and the coordinates referenced a location in Arlington, Virginia that Jake recognized as being near Pentagon facilities. Other numerical sequences appeared to be system identifiers and access codes that followed patterns consistent with government computer networks. Jake's discovery created a moral dilemma that challenged his understanding of ethical behavior. If his analysis was correct, Chloe's tattoo documented unauthorized access to military computer systems, a federal crime that could result in decades of imprisonment. But reporting his suspicions would require him to explain how he'd obtained and analyzed the information, potentially making him complicit in Chloe's activities. The next day's computer science class was tense with unspoken knowledge. Jake watched Chloe carefully, noting details about her behavior and academic performance that he'd previously overlooked. Her programming abilities were clearly more advanced than she'd demonstrated, and her familiarity with security protocols suggested practical experience rather than theoretical learning. During lab time, Jake approached Chloe's workstation under the pretense of seeking help with his own assignment. "Martinez, can you look at this authentication code? I'm having trouble implementing the encryption properly." Chloe reviewed Jake's code with the kind of systematic analysis that demonstrated deep understanding of cybersecurity principles. Her suggestions were precise and effective, implementing security measures that exceeded the class requirements. "Where did you learn to write security code like that?" Jake asked, watching Chloe modify his program with expert precision. "Practice," Chloe replied, not looking up from the screen. "Security programming requires understanding how systems can be compromised." Jake found her answer revealing. "You mean like penetration testing?" Chloe paused in her coding, recognizing that Jake's questions were becoming more specific than casual academic curiosity would explain. "Something like that." After class, Jake approached Mr. Chen with concerns about what he'd discovered. Chen listened to Jake's explanation with growing alarm, recognizing that the implications extended far beyond typical student behavioral issues. "Morrison," Chen said carefully, "if your analysis is accurate, this situation involves potential federal crimes. I need to contact school administration and probably law enforcement." "But what if I'm wrong? What if it's just coincidental that the numbers look like classified information?" Chen studied the binary sequences that Jake had decoded, noting that the patterns were too specific and complex to be coincidental. This level of detailed technical information doesn't appear randomly in decorative tattoos. We need to involve authorities who can properly investigate. 3 days later, FBI cyber crime specialists arrived at St. Catherine's Academy to interview Chloe about her tattoo and any knowledge she might have about unauthorized computer access. The interview was conducted in the presence of school administrators and Chloe's father, who had been called away from his recruitment duties to address what administrators had described as a serious situation involving his daughter. Staff Sergeant Martinez sat in stunned silence as FBI agents explained their investigation into sophisticated penetrations of military computer networks that appeared to be documented in his daughter's tattoo artwork. "Agent Williams," Sergeant Martinez said, his voice tight with controlled emotion, "are you telling me that my daughter has been hacking into military systems?" Agent Williams studied the documentation that had been compiled during the preliminary investigation. "Sergeant, the evidence suggests that someone with advanced technical capabilities has been conducting unauthorized access operations against classified government networks. The information in your daughter's tattoo corresponds to specific penetration activities that we've been investigating for over 2 years." Chloe sat quietly during the interview, realizing that her carefully maintained cover identity had been destroyed by a momentary wardrobe malfunction that had exposed artwork she'd intended to keep hidden until she was ready to leverage her capabilities for legitimate career purposes. "Chloe," Agent Williams said, addressing her directly for the first time, "we need to understand the extent of your activities and whether you've been working with other individuals or organizations." Chloe considered her options, recognizing that denying involvement would be futile given the evidence that connected her to specific cyber operations. Her best strategy was cooperation that might result in more favorable legal treatment. "I've been conducting penetration testing since I was 13, Chloe said quietly. "Initially as curiosity about my father's work environment, but eventually as systematic exploration of government network vulnerabilities." Agent Williams made notes while asking follow-up questions. "Have you shared accessed information with other parties?" "Yes. I've sold intelligence reports to corporate research firms and international organizations through encrypted channels." The admission created immediate tension in the room. Sergeant Martinez's face showed a mixture of betrayal and devastating realization that his daughter had been conducting espionage operations while he'd been recruiting soldiers for the same military she'd been compromising. Over the following hours, Chloe provided detailed information about her cyber operations, the techniques she'd developed, and the extent of her penetrations into government systems. The scope of her activities was far beyond what investigators had initially suspected, involving dozens of successful intrusions and significant intelligence compromise. But perhaps most shocking was Chloe's revelation that she'd been planning to approach military cybersecurity agencies after graduation, intending to offer her services as a penetration testing specialist who could help improve government network security. "I never intended to damage military capabilities," Chloe explained. "My operations were designed to identify vulnerabilities that could be exploited by hostile actors. I was documenting weaknesses that needed to be addressed." Agent Williams studied the comprehensive evidence that Chloe had provided. "Your techniques are sophisticated enough to suggest professional training. Where did you learn these capabilities?" "Self-taught through analysis of my father's work environment and systematic study of network architecture documentation. I've been learning cybersecurity techniques since middle school." The investigation revealed that Chloe's cyber operations had been more extensive and sophisticated than any teenage hacker case in FBI history. Her penetrations had accessed classified information that could have compromised national security, but her methods had been careful enough to avoid detection for years. 2 weeks later, Chloe Martinez became the youngest person ever recruited into the military's elite cyber warfare division, her criminal charges dismissed in exchange for her agreement to serve her country's cybersecurity interests rather than compromise them. Her father, Staff Sergeant Martinez, was reassigned to cybersecurity oversight duties where his experience with recruitment and his daughter's case provided valuable insights into identifying and developing exceptional technical talent. The wrist tattoo that had exposed Chloe's secret became the foundation for a new military program that used similar techniques to commemorate successful defensive operations against hostile cyber attacks. And sometimes, the most dangerous enemies were the ones who'd been protecting you all along, waiting for the right moment to switch sides and fight for justice instead of profit. End of story. If this story opened your eyes to the cyber warriors among us, drop a like, share it with someone in tech, and subscribe to Silent Warrior Stories. Because sometimes the most dangerous hackers are the ones who choose to protect instead of attack, and their tattoos tell stories that redefine what patriotism looks like.